Hi, everyone. I'm Liz Minnella.
I'm Katina Burke.
And welcome to Demfluenced. Since this is our first podcast, we thought we would introduce ourselves. So I am a Demfluencer, a fundraiser. I use social media to help pass an assault weapons ban in Illinois, and I used it to raise tens of millions of dollars for the Harris campaign. But all along, I saw this big problem, which was that Democrats were not investing in the infrastructure we needed to really make this new media ecosystem compete with what they have on the right. So we started this podcast to help try to fix that. And I'm joined by my co-host, fellow Loyola Academy graduate, Go Ramblers.
Go Ramblers.
And Chicago alum, Katina Burke. Hi, Katina.
Hi. I'm so excited to be starting this with you, Liz. Yeah, so my background technically is not in politics. I'm your traditional corporate girly political science nerd. And after the devastating loss in November, I have decided that I no longer can be solely a corporate girly. I must join the resistance. And here we are.
Here we are. Tina slid into my DMs, guys.
I did. It works.
It works.
It works, guys.
And here we are on a podcast together. So what is Demfluenced and how is it different than other political podcasts? Well, when we lost in November, we finally fucking agreed on something, which was that Republicans were showing up to a different battlefield and we lost an online messaging war. And we need to build that infrastructure of podcasters and influencers and liberal voices on the right. We need to invest in that. And we need to do that because that is clearly what gets the message across to voters. And if you don't believe me, look at who the president is and look at how he convinced 77 million people to vote for him. He did it through their phones.
The theme of this entire podcast is going to be legitimizing, monetizing, and publicizing our influencer space. And we're actually kind of lucky, silver lining, that we have so many liberal influencers that are actually doing this on their own without any like traditional structure or infrastructure. One thing that Liz and I are actually doing on the side, it's not in relation with Demfluenced, but we're building a nonprofit that its goal is to give that structure to the existing liberal voices and then also build an army of micro-influencers very similar to what we see on the right. And that organization is called Connect Forward.
Right now, what's happening in politics is everything is changing. The way we cover politics, the way elected officials message to voters, everything is changing. And I think a lot of people think that ignoring it or not talking about it will make it go away. It won't. This is a pivotal time in our history, and that's what we're going to do here. We're going to talk about it. That's the thesis of our podcast, that the more we talk about this and dissect the different players and how it's all coming together, the stronger and faster we can build this ecosystem. I have a metaphor. It's kind of like if there are any Bravo fans out there. Bravo, I've been watching it for a long time, back in the Queer Eye days before Bethany Frankel could pay her rent. And at that time, it was just a channel on television. And then something happened, which was that new media started covering Bravo in a really viral way. So there were podcasts that were making millions of dollars in ad revenue talking about the shows. There were fan accounts that had more followers on Instagram than the stars on the show themselves. And an ecosystem was born because people wanted to talk about these shows. And that's when Bravo went from a channel to a universe. And they really embraced it because they realized the more they fed the ecosystem, the more the ecosystem fed them. They were good for each other. The influencers were good for Bravo, and Bravo was good for the influencers. So that is basically what we want to build here. And we want to make a community that cares about this. People who want to talk about this, people who want to see it thrive and succeed. And we want to do it together. And we, most importantly, want people to understand that social media has real legislative and electoral power, and we are going to build that power together. So let's Demfluence. Okay, so our first guest is basically the founding mother of talking politics on social media. She also literally wrote the book on it. It's called Democracy in Retrograde, and it is required reading for this class. She is former counsel to Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, and she is the woman behind Emily in Your Phone on Instagram, which has almost 250,000 followers now. Subtle flex. And she is also my friend and mentor. She taught me how to advocate, make my voice heard. She gave me a framework of how to use social media to pass a law and build real political power, which helped me tremendously when passing an assault weapons ban here in Illinois. And when we thought about who our first guest should be for this podcast, it was an obvious choice. So please welcome the pioneer of Demfluencing, Emily Amick. Welcome to Demfluenced.
Happy to be here. Hi, guys.
Hi.
So you were the first person I ever heard use the term Demfluencer. So let's chat about that. Did you coin that phrase, and how would you define it?
Look, monkeys in a room could write Shakespeare, so I won't claim credit that I don't know what it is, but I certainly had never heard of it before I started talking about it and started trying to encourage people to become Demfluencers and organize ourselves a little bit. I have always loved influencing and influencers. And I think that over the years, we've seen this sort of shift towards creators and calling everybody that. But to me, that has always sort of reeked a little bit of misogyny, because the core influencers are, of course, moms on Instagram who are hype businesswoman. And I've always aspired to be an influencer. And I think that if you are engaged in political messaging, what you are trying to do is influence people. And that is what I've been trying to do with Emily in Your Phone for all these years. And my goal has always been for people to see what I am doing and then take it and make it their own, whether that's in their communities or on Instagram or on some other platform that I can't figure out because I'm starting to age out of being the technical one in a room. But, I think for me, being a Demfluencer is about taking the things that you care about, taking your values and translating them into messaging. In the parlance of democracy in Retrograde, where we have a civic personality test, there's 4 types of civic personalities, and one of those is connector. And Demfluencing is all about helping people connect with their political power and help make America a better place.
I love it. And when you started this, what year did you start your Instagram?
I started Emily in Your Phone in 2019.
Okay, so was it your intention to counteract what you were seeing on the right, or did you start and then realize, holy shit, there's this army of people doing this on the right and they're well-funded and well-organized?
So I grew up in Texas. I went to University of Alabama for graduate school, and I have always had a lot of Instagram acquaintances who are conservative girly pops. And I've always been a lover of Instagram. And during the first Trump administration, I was working in the Senate. And so I just had a personal Instagram where I shared photos of my dogs, because who doesn't post pictures of their dogs on the internet? And I would constantly see conservative girlies sharing a lot of, frankly, QAnon content that was watercolor and in the vernacular of the platform. And I started doing research on what was really happening. So really, my interest in this started long before I started Emily in Your Phone. And I was posting on my personal Instagram for a while before I started Emily in Your Phone. And that's sort of when I started doing it intentionally, was by creating this new brand.
And so talking about right-wing influencers, would you say that there's a point in time in which you realized that these right-wing influencers would actually translate into real electoral power?
I have always thought they would. I think that women are so often dismissed, and a lot of the early influencing, when we're talking especially about Instagram, I think people didn't really believe it was going to amount to anything. Steve Bannon has also been working on influencers. He invested really early in gamers and Discord and creating, not only sort of the Breitbarts of it all, but this sort of vast web of right-wing influencers for many, many, many years, right? Over a decade. So there's been this massive investment on the right. And I think, look, when I was in journalism school in rural Alabama in 2008, and it was very, very clear to anyone with a brain that social media was the future of the industry. Nonetheless, I almost got kicked out of my program for saying that I thought people should give up on paper newspapers. And like, that's a true story. Someone on Instagram was mocking me for telling it. It was a true story. And I think that's just reflective of, the people in decision-making positions are often people who were unwilling to see the future of where it was going. So I think that, social media is such an effective tool for extremist movements. And the Tea Party was really a precursor to MAGA. And social media is the perfect platform for MAGA.
Yeah, absolutely. And so now we're starting to see the Democrats realize that they really should be embracing social media. And at the DNC, that was probably one of the first times that we actually saw them embrace influencers and creators, but they mingled them with the press. So I guess, would you say that there is like a real influencers versus the press, or are we treating them the same? Like, what's your thoughts on that and how they're the same and how they're different?
Yeah, I think that, the answer is somewhere in the middle, right, for every question. And there are certainly people who are social media based who are journalists. I think of, there's some great Substacks like Public Notice, people who are doing great journalism work. There's also people who work for mainstream media outlets who are not engaged in journalism, right, who are influencers. And so there's on both sides. I think that it becomes very complicated, but what I don't think that there should be is some false premise that there's competition between the two. It doesn't really help anyone. And the reality is anyone who's doing the work to try to get fact-based information out to help people become civically engaged, informed, whatever it may be, is doing good work. At the DNC is like chaotic. There's never not drama. I think that the sort of the major media outlets, and there was 15,000 members of the press who were given tags to come be press at the DNC. And so there's just such a huge volume of them that there's bound to be sort of frankly, some hurt feelings about who could and couldn't access different places. But, I think that the mainstream media, when you look at the big newspapers, they have been incredibly slow to move with the times. It's very much giving taxi industry. And I saw today that Neiman Foundation announced that Washington Post is going to allow their online content guy to start creating content from his own handle. And like, good Lord, it's March 2025. You're realizing that the internet is personality based, not institution based. You're very, very, very late, but they are finally catching up. So I think that, in any changing ecosystem, disruptors come up to fill the void, and old bureaucracies get frustrated. Like tale as old as time. That's happening. I think that the DNC has to realize that like influencers, creators, they're not a homogenous group. We are, in fact, individual people who approach our jobs differently, have different audiences. There's a lot of heterogeneity within this group of people, and all of those people need to be treated as individuals, not as widgets that can be interchanged like television programs.
Ooh, amen to that. So speaking of the DNC and the Democratic establishment, why do you think they were so far behind what was happening? I mean, we touched on this a little bit, that social media is really effective for extremist movements, but other reasons why you think we were so far behind, what kind of key progress indicators you would like to see, and without broadcasting free consulting advice, which do not do because you should be paid for that shit. What the fuck do we do about this? Like, how do we fix this? How do we build and compete with what's going on the right?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that people wrongly assign all work to the DNC, and and this is a problem, right? That in general, Democrats love institutions. We have become the party of institutions. And that is a sort of a play that I see being done over and over and over again. the DNC shouldn't have been in charge of the social media revolution. Like, that's not their job. Their job is to help candidates get elected, to work with state parties, to choose candidates, collect candidates, and help their campaigns. Should they have been making sure that all of those candidates were social media capable and actually doing it? Yes, absolutely. Did they fail on that front? Beyond. But I don't think that they are in charge of messaging. Right? Like, messaging, the messaging ecosystem needs to be more than simply elected officials. And part of Democrats' problem all of these years is the only people who have been the key messengers. It's been like elected officials and Rachel Maddow, frankly. Yeah. And that's not, those people are institutional actors. At the end of the day, they have to engage in institutional actions, therefore. That doesn't make a grassroots movement. And I assign a lot of blame to the advocacy organizations that were supposed to be doing the organizing. They were supposed to be doing the work. They were very, very slow to accept that social media was a reality and a presence, and that they couldn't, all of the comms consultants who were taking 25% off the top of ad buys weren't going to be able to make that same money on influencer plays. And I think that the massive, the system wasn't set up to change, and so it didn't.
There it is. I think that that's a big key thing. A lot of times when people ask why did they not prioritize influencers and new media, why did the campaign not? I've heard Ken Martin even say this, is because there is like an industrial complex that goes on between consultants and traditional media buys. And the campaigns keep hiring those consultants, and those consultants keep making money off the media buys, and round we go. So I think the more we say that and talk about that and provide proven solutions, the things that work better, I think that's how we start to get out of that cycle. So before we get into current events, I just want to shout out how much you have invested in micro influencers and bringing people up. I'm sitting here with my EYP University sweatshirt that you handmade, a group of influencers who came to your house. We did a DC trip. We met with the Office of Gun Violence Prevention. Why was it important for you to not just do things like that, but you've had either yourself or people that work with you sit down and give career advice? I had one of the best conversations with a close friend of yours that you introduced me to that helped clarify exactly how I should structure a fundraising business, move forward in a career of influencing and fundraising. Why is it important to you to prioritize investing in younger, smaller, newer influencers?
I have done this all these years, largely unsupported. I know how hard it is, and I come to it from a very privileged place. I was a full-time litigator for the first 5.5 years of doing my account, right? I had a full-time job, and I had all of this knowledge in my head that I was able to sort of quickly come out of it. But at the end of the day, I shouldn't be the only one on Instagram communicating. I can talk to my community, but there's lots of other different people who have their own communities who they need to be talking to. And this only works when there's a quantity, a mass. And I certainly think that I could have done more, but what I'll say is I've always tried my best. And I tried to grow. I tried to help people when I saw them. And I think I've always seen the people who I've been able to form relationships as real people. And one of the things that has frustrated me all of these years is being treated like a bulletin board. Most of the outreach I get from both other influencers and other groups is just can you post this? And it's hello, how are you? And last year I literally had cancer and I was still getting those accounts, and I was yeah, I'm doing pretty poorly. Thanks for asking. I'm a human being. And so I've always just tried to remember that at the end of the day, when you go through life, the only thing you have is, your time here, the community build, the relationships you build, the legacy you leave. And so much of the book is about building community. And it's because I actually believe what the words that I put on the page. And so I've always tried to live that. And I think that there's no perfect system here. It's a very, very weird and hard industry, and it's extremely difficult to have a living doing it right now. And so knowing what I know, I just try to do what I can to help others who want to do the good work, because at the end of the day, I'm constantly posting about the hordes of right-wing content I receive on a daily basis. And there are just thousands and thousands of Maha Mamas posting every day. And if we don't want them taking over, the only option is to put out content on our end.
That's right. Form our own army. So now we are going to dive into some current events. Thank you for that. And thank you for all the work that you have done and will continue to do. I feel like people don't say thank you to you.
Thank you.
So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for teaching me everything I know. So I'm going to start with a little overview of how we're going to cover current events, because there are a million podcasts that cover what's going on in the news. We want this to be very approachable. We want to give you just the right amount of information. And we want it to be the type of information that arms you for an argument with your MAGA uncle. And we'll always be discussing current events kind of through the lens of how it was covered in new media and how it's impacting the ecosystem, so that we're always kind of like tying it to the mission and thesis of our podcast. So there was a lot this week that ties into that. Let's start with the spending bill.
Yes. So this past week, the House passed a spending bill. 217 Republicans voted yes, 215 Democrats, and one Republican voted no, Thomas Massey, deficit hawk. Essentially, what this budget bill does is it allows Republicans to move forward on their budget. They want to give $4.5 trillion in tax cuts along with $2 trillion in spending cuts. And it's going to be really, really hard to do that without touching Medicaid or Medicare. Specifically, the largest line item is an $880 billion energy and commerce committee cut. Now, 80 million American adults and children are on Medicaid. This would immediately disenfranchise those people. Of course, President Trump is saying, we're not touching it. We're not touching it. But it's going to be super hard to...
And you cut that committee without touching Medicaid.
Right. It's virtually impossible. They're saying they want to like target fraud and other nefarious things that are going on under that committee. But I think I saw an interview on NPR with AOC, and she was saying that really the number of like fraudulent line items really only totals about $50 billion. So that doesn't get you anywhere near what they're looking for.
That's crazy. There's also $230 billion to the Agriculture Committee, and that you can't achieve that without cutting SNAP, which literally feeds people in this country. There was a poll from Hart Research conducted from the nonprofit Families Over Billionaires that found that 71% of Trump supporters opposed the cuts. When I read that, I was like, who the fuck are the 29% in favor of it? So TLDR, this bill fucking sucks. It's tax breaks for billionaires on the backs of working people. Again, people who need social safety nets, and it increases our deficit. Emily, how did they get away with this shit?
It's a hard question. I think that Trump, one of the really interesting things that Trump did with this particular budget, he's been saying he wants one big bill. And the Senate was like, no, we're not going to do that. And the House was like, yeah, bud, we're going to do what you want. And one of the really interesting things they did was, this was, of course, an authorizing resolution. This wasn't actually the budget. So we don't have the exact details. We know at the end of the day, right, there's no way to follow what they want to do with the cuts they want without cutting Medicaid. But including overtime, no tax on overtime and no tax on tips was very much like a shiny object that Trump included to distract the MAGA base. I'll say, big picture, my big argument all of these years has always been they are building this massive messaging ecosystem so that they can do things like this, because they have the infrastructure to be able to drown out fact-based voices, right? Reasonable people to be like, no, you want Medicaid. Nearly half of births are covered by Medicaid. Like, you want healthy babies, we need Medicaid. And what I saw from the conservative ecosystem was very much like, if you want Medicaid, if you want health insurance, pay for it.
Yeah.
Work, bitch.
Yeah. I also saw that they're cutting conservative talk radio, and I saw this on TikTok too, is that Medicaid cuts are for Medicaid abroad. I don't even know what that means. But like, they just get to say things, and because they have the messaging apparatus, whoever sees that, whatever Maha Mommy sees that, she's like, oh yeah, it's not like Medicaid for us. It's Medicaid abroad. Like, they just are able to compartmentalize in their brain. I do think we saw some good things this week. We know that Cory Booker started this Senate Strategic Communication Committee. Emily, how do you feel congressional Democrats did covering this bill this week? Specifically on social media.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think over the last couple of weeks, suddenly we're seeing tons of Instagram reels. Like, it's the Christopher Columbus Instagram this week, and it's
That's good.
Yeah, it's great. I think it's great. I think that, one of the things I hope that we'll see is that every office will start doing their own thing. We certainly don't need everyone to try to become a facsimile of Cory Booker, right? We need different members have different strengths, different weaknesses, and they should be leaning into their personalities, because authenticity is the single most important thing to create good content. And if it's not authentic, it's not good content.
Yeah, I think that can kind of be a through line. As you said, I saw a lot of elected officials putting themselves out there this week. Our hometown Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky, who is 79 years old, made a reel about how this will impact Social Security. Oh, sweet Jan.
She tried.
It was so sweet.
It was cute.
I think she is an incredible congresswoman, and she turned our whole area blue, and I love her so much. But it is time for her to retire and make room for new voices and new talent. A lot of people sent me that reel and was like, this is so cringe. Do you think, Emily, this is why elected officials were so anti-social media? Because it's boomers are so bad at it, and it shows how old they are. I know you've gotten a lot of hot water for using the word boomer this week on Threads.
I did.
So
can't even speak the name. It's like Voldemort. I think that the answer to that question is multifaceted and complicated, but certainly a contributing factor is that many of the decision makers are not people who are on social media. And if you're not on something, you can't understand its value. You don't understand its vernacular. You don't understand its possibility. I'll say, like, I have continually been in conversations over the years where I'm fighting for my goddamn life, trying to convince people that it has value. And they just don't believe me. I'll say, like, I started work and people were still spending money on radio when I started my career, right? Like, and people were having to be like, just spend money on like TV.
Yeah.
You don't put your whole budget in radio. Radio is important. You have to have you have to do a little bit of everything, but you can't just not do things. And I think that the people who are currently in office are often not people who have the personalities that are those that do well online. Like, it actually is hard to create good content. I think people, what I've heard from a lot of members is they think that they should be able to just be recorded doing what they're already doing and have a staff member who already has a full-time job cut it and put it online. And like, that's the content that it should be. And that's bad content. And bad content is worse than no content, in my opinion. Like, I don't think you should be doing bad content. I think that, like, look, the boomers are also online, as can be attested by the both reaction to my recent thread, but also all of the biggest resist lib bases on the internet. Like, when you look at the top Substacks, those are all full of boomers. When you look at the actual people who watch the big left-wing political YouTubes, it's all boomers, right? Like, both the base of who's watching and the base of who's donating, they are boomers. So I think that if there's boomers in, Congress who can't create content for us. They should be creating content for those people. Like there certainly is this massive base of people who want this content and who find things that I think are cringe, like appealing. And one of my pushes has always been like, we need to be creating content for different audiences and you need to be doing it different ways. I've heard that Senator Booker is telling members that like you need to be posting every day on Facebook, Threads, Blue Sky, and IG. And that would not be my suggestion for every member. I think that people should do what they're good at. You should lean into your strengths and you should, again, always, the most important thing is authenticity.
Build your audience where they are. I did see a lot of liberal media coverage on in the influencer girly world. We're going to do a micro influencer shout out. PA Moms for Change made a bit.ly. So if you go to bit.ly/GOP ripoff, all caps, it takes you to the House Dems website where you can click around about the budget plan. And specifically, you can put in your district and it tells you how many people in your area will lose Medicaid, ACA benefits, and SNAPs. Hell City Merriman got Chuck Schumer and a bunch of Senate Dems outside their vote-a-rama. She covered that really well. She got Chuck Schumer, your former boss, to say fuck on camera, which was fun. And the Medicaid rally outside Congress, there was a huge gaggle of influencers. Jasmine Crockett giving us amazing content. Saw a bunch of influencers that we know and love. Do you feel like we showed up, the Demfluenced universe showed up to cover this week?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was good. I hope that members don't learn that swearing gets you to go viral and therefore that becomes the only content that we see because like 2 out of 3 of those were just a member swearing. I think that it's, I certainly know that the Hill wants content creators to come make content with them. That has that dam has broken. They are very, very interested in that. I would say like if you want to make content with your member, you should reach out to them in district. They might say yes, you guys. They are very that is something that has become interesting to them. And I think that they're also realizing that like the content needs to be interesting. Some of them are just uber talented. Jasmine Crockett, AOC, right? Like they are preternaturally, uniquely talented at comms that works on socials. And Chris Murphy is the same. He's a guy who gets it. He knows what the people want. And he's able to give it to them. I think Brian Schatz has also been doing a really, really good job. He remains like an underrated member of the Senate. I think he'll be the next Dem leader after Schumer. And I'll say like Schatz has been personally I know he's been on the internet consuming content for many, many years. Mm-hmm. And so I think he actually understands the ecosystem, which is why he's been able to do really well over the past month, not just the past week, producing content that accurately conveys sort of what they're doing and good messaging.
Awesome. Let's get into the temper tantrum in the Oval Office.
Yes. So earlier this week, we got the pleasure of seeing our administration, President Trump and Vice President Vance, berate, yell, slap on the wrist Zelensky in the Oval Office. And it was some piping hot tea when you got Andy Cohen even to retweet something saying, "Did I just witness Real Housewives in the real world?" It was so good. Emily, what was your reaction to what we saw in the Oval Office?
I think it was a really embarrassing day to be an American.
Period.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. They canceled the press conference. They canceled peace talks. There was a Russian propaganda outlet in the White House room. It was scary. Like, walk us through some potential long-term implications of that.
Yeah, I think that Trump and Vance were obviously putting on a little show that they set up with literally Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend, who is a member of a propaganda regime, where he's like, Zelensky, why won't you wear a suit to the Oval Office? And the point was to show respectability, right? Like that Zelensky's insufficiently thankful, insufficiently respectful to deserve what Trump and Vance are articulating as essentially like a donation that America is making, right? Like, well, what we are doing with Ukraine is not a donation out of the goodness of our hearts. It's national security. Because it turns out that like Russia is not in fact our ally. And so I think that the whole thing was pretense, and where we're headed is very, very concerning to me, because pretense for what? Probably to stop supporting Ukraine.
Yes, I think that then I also feel like that obviously blew the internet up, blew up social media, blew up every podcast. Every person is going to be talking about this. Immediately, Chris Murphy, like it went up within minutes, made a great face to camera reel. I also think he's doing a great job of engaging with constituents. I think he has real presidential energy. He put that reel up in minutes, talking about the implications of this, what a dark day it is for America, how disgusting it is, and just condemning the actions of the Trump administration. And then a side note that came out of that, I think we have a picture of this reel. I am obsessed with this man's kitchen. So I think he was like in Connecticut, and it is like, Emily, I know you're a kitchen girly. We're going to show you a picture of it. Can we show her a picture?
I like the kitchen. I wonder, because he also separated from his wife in the fall. So I'm like, where's this man? What is he doing?
Okay, that kitchen was for sure decorated by a woman, because there was a framed photo like on the counter, like a painting. And that is like peak. That is peak like millennial girl core, to have like a gold framed oil painting in your kitchen,
right,
leaning on the counter.
I have 4.
Your kitchen is amazing. And it was, and like slate countertops, or like maybe soapstone.
Yeah, it was gorgeous.
Beautiful. And like all the see-through cabinets.
Yeah. I think I love it. And I think that, what works well for content is content where people can connect with the viewer, with the speaker, right? And one of the problems with a lot of content that we've had from Dem members over the years is they want it to be very, very formal. They want to be like sitting behind their desk. And what makes social media content except like in a very, very powerful tool for persuasion is that you have an immediate parasocial relationship with the viewer.
Yes.
And you have to cultivate that. You can't create a barrier and then expect it to work.
Yeah. And that he did it. We are now parasocially linked because his kitchen is like on my Pinterest board. I'm not kidding. The hardware, exquisite. So, yeah, just wrapping up our foreign policy, we're getting gaslit by the White House and Pete Hegseth that that Russia didn't invade the Ukraine. They're all parroting the same talking points. KK Caroline is out there in the White House press conference talking about that this is like the most obvious thing. Like, duh. What do you mean? What do you mean Russia invaded the Ukraine? And Pete Hegseth saying that he can't say for sure whether or not that happened. Then we flash back to him covering it on Fox News. Russia invades Ukraine. This is, I feel like, the first time in a long time we've seen like a fracture of bipartisan foreign policy strategy. And is this what we've been saying all along? This is, Trump is Putin's puppet. Is this just playing into that?
There's been a lot of interesting content created about trying to figure out why Trump is the way he is, and why is he so allegiant to Russian interests over American interests. And I'm not sure that anyone has one specific answer, but I think his vision of foreign policy is very, very much giving rich granddad. Like, he very much thinks that everyone is after the United States money, and what we should do is prioritize, keeping our money and making other people deal with their own problems. And the reality is, what has allowed sort of the world and the global economy to flourish post World War II has been relative peace and stability and relative intergovernmental coordination, so that we can travel, so that we can trade, so that we can like do all of these things. And abandoning our allies, abandoning NATO, right? Like, abandoning all of these things turns that back. And Make America Great Again is about bringing America back to a time that wasn't better, right? Like, maybe it was better for Donald Trump singularly and uniquely. If like he had been a rich dude who wanted to fuck young girls in 1950,
It was a great
maybe
time
he
for
could have
that.
gotten away with it.
Yeah.
Right. But like other than that, not a great time I want to go back to. Things have really gotten better. And I think his foreign policy is very wrongheaded, and it is going to probably lead to disastrous consequences, not only for the Ukrainian people who have been evaded by Russians, but for us.
Yeah. Great. So we have World War III to look forward to. Let's pivot and let's talk more about KK Caroline, because I like just saying that so much. So
Rolls off the tongue.
yeah, it does. White House press corps. What did we learn this week?
Well, so the White House press corps has traditionally been run or organized by a bipartisan group called the White House Correspondents Association. And that has typically had your traditional news sources whether they're traveling with the president on Air Force One or they're in the Oval Office. It had Fox News, ABC, AP, et cetera, et cetera. But flash forward to today, KKK Caroline has announced that actually she is going to be determining which members of the press are going to be in the Oval and flying on Air Force One. And we've already seen them exercise this by kicking AP out of the Oval Office for refusing to call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. We won't be calling it the Gulf of America on this show.
We will not. This show, it will be the Gulf of Mexico. So Caroline Leavitt, now she decides who's in the White House press corps. I think that means we'll see a lot more new media, as we did when they did this sham release of these Epstein files. They released them all to influencers. So we have a photo of like DC Drano and all these horrible right-wing influencers. What do you think the thinking was behind that? Just like make it a spectacle?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the most important things for these Republicans is to tend to the garden of their influencer ecosystem, right? And that means that you have to make them feel centered, important, and provide to them content that they can put out to their audience about what the administration is doing. You can't just ignore them and expect them to continue to be app chicks, despite the fact that they're all getting paid a hand over foot money. I think that like the Epstein rollout was incredibly bad. I think it was embarrassing for all. And I'll say like the conservative ecosystem is really unhappy about it. And it's been really, really interesting to watch. I mean, governing is always harder than throwing lobs. And we are seeing that now. But yeah, the whole thing was a nothing burger. And it's been, Jessica Krause of House and Habit it's been really interesting to watch her scramble for her long-term defense of child predators, and how to justify her weird fixation on this issue. And obviously she's just mining it for views and money. And she's making money. She's like the number 2 or number 1 Substack.
Wow.
For a reason. And it's because she produces content about things like this. And it's pretty disgusting, to be honest.
Yeah, they're obsessed with talking about child trafficking, like obsessed. And it's always like a dog whistle, like when you see someone post about that, which objectively, trafficking children is a bad thing. A thing that primarily happens to a lot of migrant children. And when we have family separation and taking away legal aid services to unaccompanied minors, it happens more. But let's obviously ignore all the facts and just have this weird obsession about like white children being kidnapped and trafficked. They talk about it constantly. It's very weird. And it's something that in these circles spins so much. I want to get back to talking about Caroline Leavitt because I'm obsessed with talking about her. Emily, one time you told me that half the fun of politics is getting to talk shit about people. And that really stayed with me.
Professionalized gossip.
Yeah.
That's what politics is.
Yeah. And it makes it okay. We have a picture of Caroline's weird lip liner or whatever is happening with that. My sister, when I was going through this outline, she told me that it was mean to talk about her lips. And then I showed her Suzanne's content and I was like, but Suzanne Lambert, a great follow, talks about Republican makeup trends. And she said, well, it's okay when Suzanne does it because she's funny. So I guess I need to be funnier about it. But like, do you have a hot take on what the hell is happening via that woman's mouth? Is it
I mean, I think that the Republican makeup trend is very, very much about how they have a tendency to wear like crusty old trends.
Yeah.
And they like can't keep up with the times. And that is inherently like MAGA's whole shtick is like return us back to a time when no one would criticize us for wearing, like the heaviest black eyeliner that was popular, I don't know, in the 80s.
Yeah.
So I think like Caroline came out originally wearing very Republican makeup, and she's clearly since gotten some new assistants.
Yeah.
In the hair and makeup department.
Agreed.
It's so funny to me because for as long as I can remember, Republicans have been so mean, calling everybody names all the time, like Sleepy Joe. Like, they've just been so mean. And now when Democrats fight back, it's like you're pinning women against women. How dare you fight back or say something mean about a woman who's like the head of the press? And it's just so performative, all of it.
Yeah. Do you think Democrats need to be meaner?
I think that there's a place for everyone in our ecosystem.
Okay.
That's a really good answer.
That's a great answer. Katina has...
I have a big question for you because I have not seen many people talk about this, but you posted on, I think, Threads about porn bots on Instagram. And
on Threads.
On Threads.
Many.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I just would love to hear, because if you're thinking about it how I'm thinking about it, there's like a direct correlation to exposure for young men to these like porn bots online, and it feeds them.
It is a porn bot. I don't think I know what a porn bot is.
Do you want to describe it, Emily?
Not really, but sure. So, Zuckerberg made this big announcement of essentially like he had his tete-a-tete with Trump, and then he said like, we're entering our free speech era, and like you can say and do anything on Threads now. And suddenly I started getting essentially, not real. I'm sure they're all bots. Who knows if they're even AI images, but comments from people purporting to be jailbait women with links to their OnlyFans. Like, none of these women look a day older than 18, is what I would say. Consistently, again and again. And anytime, especially if your thread starts going even like not viral, but like getting moderate traction, you just start getting like 4, 5, 6 of these comments, and it never ends, where they're just like trolling for views. And sometimes when I will see men leaving asshole comments in my threads, I'll go and I'll look at their replies and I'll like see what they've been up to on Threads, which is probably not healthy. I should probably not do this, but it's generally because I want to know if they're a bot or not. Because if they're a bot, I just automatically block them. And I'll say like I think that the porn bots do it because it works.
Well, yeah, they work, and I think big picture that these like porn bots contribute to this like dehumanization of just like sex and sexuality in general. You have a bunch of young boys that are taken over to OnlyFans at a young age or whatever, Pornhub, and they kind of disassociate from like what a real relationship is like. It potentially feeds them down this like, how do I get girls because no girls will talk to me, feeds them into this like toxic masculinity manosphere. They, try to learn how to be, approachable and alpha male. And I think it really just feeds, it's like a can of worms that feeds into the manosphere.
I know it's our job, but sometimes I really hate the internet.
Yeah.
There's a dark, dark side of that. Do you think that that's pulling people into this? That it's not just they're maybe coming for the freedom, but staying for the weird other parts of the internet?
I mean, I think it's pretty wild that the Trump administration helped get Andrew Tate released from Romania.
Yeah.
Right.
Like an action, I think it's pretty disgusting.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that aligning themselves with messengers like that who are alleged sex traffickers, but most certainly Andrew Tate is a man who consistently advocates for violence against women, both systemically and interpersonally. And the fact that the Trump administration has no qualms aligning themselves with someone with those morals is pretty reflective on their values and who they value.
Yeah. Okay. So before we play our fun game, to end us, like, to cleanse our palate from thinking about that disgusting side of the internet, let's talk about what I think is one of the most important and impactful parts of you online, your brand, is that you're always very action oriented. You were the first person to teach me or introduce me to the concept of calling my reps. Why is it very important for you to keep the focus on action? What are 3 things you want people to do that are action based? And what kind of like takeaways, what is your drumbeat of like, this is what people should be doing right now?
Yeah, at the end of the day, all of this conversation and all of this work is about building political power. It is about translating our values into votes and into policy change. And the way that happens is organizing. And I think like people try to dismiss both one and the other. They try to say, oh, posting on the internet is not worthwhile, don't do it. And they'll say like, oh, going out there and trying to organize isn't worthwhile. And like the reality is we have to do all of it. It's a yes and situation. And it's also, and this is something I talk a lot about in my book, Democracy in Retrograde, it is super fulfilling. And it is a way to bring yourself joy, and like getting out and building these connections and becoming part of a community that shares your values is very, very much the core to what a lot of people find happiness and fulfillment in. And we have a very, very big loneliness epidemic in this country. And I think it goes hand in hand with the degradation of the social fabric and the degradation of our civic lives. And so my goal is always for people to find actions that are authentic to them and that are sustainable. And I think a lot of the outrage bait liberal ecosystem has very, very much churn and burned people and been like, go get obsessed with something, go down a rabbit hole for 3 weeks, get really obsessed, so much so, and then give us $1,000 and then tap out, right? And I don't want that, because at the end of the day, you need sustained long-term civic engagement. I would say if I could give top 3 things that anyone could do right now, number 1 thing, start a book club. And it doesn't really have to be about books, but it's like find a couple people, find 2 girly pops whom you really like, ask each one of them to invite someone else and set up a regular cadence to meeting 1 Saturday a month. And so you're going to start having that sense of community, that group of people. Then the second thing would be to find a local activity, a civic engagement opportunity that you really, really like. Maybe it's a school board meeting. Maybe it's a bowling league. Maybe it's going to a religious service. Whatever it is that's important to you, that civic engagement in the public square, go to that. And maybe you're going to invite one of your girlies from your book club to go with you, because it's always fun to go with a friend and then debrief afterwards. That's the best part of any school board meeting. And the third thing is to make sure you know who your reps are all the way up and down the ballot. That means like from your local dog catcher all the way up to the president, you're going to know who all of those people are and start figuring out what's the best way you want to engage in influencing them. My big thing is I talk about federal politics. I want everyone to save all 6 to get the numbers of their reps and senators saved in their phone, so it's easy for them to call on a regular basis, so they can start doing that. I think it's super important, super impactful. I also see it a little bit as a gateway drug to more civic engagement. My goal is always to help people figure out a way to help build the Democratic coalition. And the Democratic Party is a coalition of people who generally share the same values and who see efficacy in getting people elected who better reflect their values. And I think we've sort of lost that. Republicans are very, very good at being mercurial about it, about realizing that like while they don't all agree on specifics, they all agree that having their guys in power are better than having our guys in power. And with that, they have amassed incredible amounts of power. And we are seeing that now. They have the legislature, the executive branch, and the judicial branch federally right now. And so the goal is always like, how do we figure out how to do that? And how do you look at all of your actions through that lens?
I love it. Well, thank you for that knowledge. Now we are always going to try to do like one fun for the girls kind of game. I've heard you always talk a lot about eldest daughter energy. You give eldest daughter energy. Eldest daughters will save this country. So we have come up with a game called Is She an Eldest Daughter? Where we're going to tell you someone, you're going to have to guess if they're an eldest daughter. There was a little bit of a back and forth on what technically defines an eldest daughter. Like, I consider myself an eldest daughter, but I have an older brother. And then also, you're an only child, right?
I'm an only child.
So is an only child an eldest daughter? I think because we are all eldest daughters, but since 2 out of the 3 are like technicalities, we're going to call oldest child, oldest daughters, like Katina, gold star oldest daughters. And then the other ones are like technical. Okay, so those are the ground rules of the game. Here we go. Nancy Mace. Is she an eldest daughter? She is, and she is a fucking gold star eldest daughter.
Okay. I don't know if I want her in my camp.
Liz Warren.
Yes.
She is not. She has an older sister, which is shocking. And it was also
I knew she had a sister, and I couldn't remember that. I was trying to remember. There's that great profile of her. I think it's in like The Atlantic.
Oh, I would like to read about her sister, especially can you imagine Liz Warren's eldest daughter? Like, if that family produces, imagine the eldest daughter in that family. MTG.
No.
She is gold star. Do you want to do the next ones?
Sure. How about our girl Kamala?
No, that one I know.
No, she is older than Maya.
She's older than Maya?
Yes. I literally had to check it like 5 times because there's that picture of them, and that, like, I literally had to fact check myself like 4 times on that. I will also say this is hard to find on the internet, so if we are wrong, don't come at me. But the Kamala one is right. Okay, keep going.
Sarah Palin.
Yes.
She is not.
No, she's not. I don't know. It's hard to know these things unless you're like into the political
I've
war.
gotten every single one wrong.
It's okay. We're not going to hold it against you.
So I stole these, like, this type of game from Watch What Happens Live, and I love when the guest gets all of them wrong and then they just keep going. You're like, the game isn't working, but I just like it. Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
Yes.
Yes.
Good job.
Joy Reid.
Yes.
Hillary Clinton.
I think she just has brothers, so yes.
Yes. Jasmine Crockett.
Yes.
And Nancy Pelosi we'll end with.
Yes.
Technically, yes, she is the youngest of 6, but she is an eldest daughter. So I would say it was hard to find people that were not eldest daughters. Just our country and the world is built on the backs of eldest daughters. So shout out eldest daughters.
Keep going. Keep doing
Nancy Pelosi mixes mob boss with eldest daughter energy, and that is a toxic combination right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fueled by hot dogs.
In a very tiny body. I did this thing with Funny or Die. It never aired during the convention. They were trying to find like kind of regular people or like smaller influencers to make content with. And I came up with a premise of comparing politicians to Chicago foods, since the convention was in Chicago. I thought it was great. Never made it. But Nancy Pelosi, I was like, she's Italian beef. She's Italian. She's skinny. The beef is thinly shaved. And like, it's our thing. It's like our kind of like our grounding piece, but like, it's spicy. It's got the giardiniera on there. Not everybody likes it. It's kind of polarizing. It's also a mess when they dip it. She can be kind of messy. The whole Biden thing never made it out there. So I'm so glad I had an excuse to talk about it here. Emily, thank you so much for hanging out with us. Thank you for inspiring me, inspiring so much about this podcast, including the name. Can you give us a rundown of all the platforms you're on?
Yeah, please find me on Instagram at Emily in Your Phone and Substack, emilyinyourphone.substack.com. Make sure to subscribe to the Substack so that they come into your inbox, because otherwise you will miss them, and they are all very, very good.
They are. So we love you, Queen of Demfluencers. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being our first guest. And let's keep going. Let's keep Demfluencing.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
So where can you follow us on social media?
Yes, so you can follow us on Instagram at Demfluenced with a D. And my personal Instagram is at Katina Burke.
And I'm at Liza Minnella. And we will also be on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So thanks so much, everyone. Thanks for being here. Thanks to our producers. And we'll see you guys next week.
Bye.